All right, guys, today I want to talk about financing your Shopify store. So, how do you get short term financing for your Shopify store? For example, if you're growing quickly, you want to spend more on marketing, maybe you want to buy some inventory, maybe you want to do something else, maybe you want to get a bunch of freelancers to help you with content creation, whatever it might be, you might need some extra cash to grow your business. And you're a small business, just like some of the examples I'm going to show you here, running a Shopify store D2C. How do you do it best? So let me actually share a small story from one of our stores in our portfolio and all the different ways we were able to finance that growth internally and externally. And I'll focus on revenue-based financing in this video. So what happened is, and I've actually showed some of this data in previous videos, right? But we were scaling into Q4. I think this is the most classic situation. That's why I want to show this example, right? So the store was making around $150,000 per month in revenue. We hit November, and we're scaling already very nicely in November. And in December, I think we made something close to 300K. I think it was 295. Exactly. There we go. But to obviously achieve that growth, we had a few barriers and hurdles and challenges. One of them, which I actually talked in quite a bit of detail in a previous video, was sometime in the beginning of November. For this store, we decided to shift from drop shipping to a 3PL, and we actually decided to buy something like, I think, 2,000 or 3,000 units in bulk to actually send to a warehouse in Dallas, Texas, to actually use a 3PL provider to ship out the items on our behalf. And obviously, we had to finance that, which you can imagine is also quite a bit, because we sent enough inventory to essentially have something like 2 months worth of stock upfront. And obviously, to do that, you would need to, in our case, I think it was something like 200K that we had to finance to essentially get the stock all the way to our 3PL. Also, of course, financing marketing spend. I already mentioned those points, as well as just generally financing all the cash flow considerations that I think any Shopify store has, especially if you're using PayPal. Then you know that PayPal likes keeping its reserve. They also pay you out, over time, and they don't pay you out very quickly, for that matter. So there's definitely working capital needs that you need to finance. And I'll talk about the experiences I've made of financing, of trying out different revenue-based providers. So check it out. All right, guys, let's talk about short-term financing your Shopify store, specifically revenue-based financing, since that has become a very popular way to get short-term financing for your Shopify store to boost your growth. And I'll be talking about 3 different revenue-based financing providers that we used for our Shopify stores. I'll go through all the pros and cons of our experiences with those providers, and also talk about other ways to get short-term financing, and really try to give you the biggest and most broadest overview, which should be helpful for you to then make the decision how you can best finance your Shopify store. So first of all, I want to start with Shopify Capital. I think you have to mention Shopify Capital, since obviously if you're running a Shopify store, then you should be aware that Shopify has its own division called Shopify Capital that gives out short-term loans to Shopify stores. And simply, if you go to your settings tab and then actually press Capital here on the left-hand side, you will already immediately land on the Shopify Capital page, which should automatically adjust the moment you start making enough sales for Shopify to give you an automated offer. And this would really happen automatically, right? So actually nothing for you to do here. And that's kind of the beauty of Shopify Capital, is that obviously they have access to all of your analytics. They obviously see your store, so they can give you an offer straight away based on all the KPIs, like literally all the financials that they have on your store. And they essentially present all of those figures on this page. So you can see I'm already given three different offers. One, which is recommended for me, is the 47K in pounds. So I'm actually not sure why this is in pounds, but in any case, this would be something like 55,000 in dollars. And the way it works is you can see that you would pay 17% of your daily sales until you've actually paid back 53.1K in pounds, right? So immediately we can actually do some quick maths. Let me pull out my calculator and just do 53,100 divided by 47K. That is 13%. So you would essentially pay a 13% flat fee to get this loan, right? And the way you pay it off is that you literally, let's say, get the loan today, it lands on your bank account, you get the 47K on your bank account. Then literally the next day, depending on the revenue your store makes, you pay 17% of that revenue until you pay off that 13.5% flat fee. And obviously you can use this money to then, for example, expand your marketing channels, buy some inventory, whatever it might be. The good thing with Shopify Capital, and I'll go into all the pros and cons, is that it obviously integrates very smoothly. The application process is very smooth. They also don't have any restrictions where you can use the money. To be honest, you can even use the money for something completely different, right? And they don't check. They literally send you the money onto your bank account, and there's no restrictions like you only having to use the money for marketing or for inventory, where some of the other providers do have those restrictions. We're going to get into that. And like you can see, flexible, obviously that's kind of their slogan: fast, flexible funding, no personal credit checks. So also no personal guarantee. There's literally, it's unsecured debt, right? It's just secured by essentially the revenue that your store makes, right? And Shopify's confidence that you will continue your revenue. Interestingly, now the revenue share, right, that you pay back, right? So how fast you need to pay back the loan varies with the size of the loan, right? So if you want to get a smaller loan, you can pay it off slower, right? So just 10% of your daily sales. If you want to get a bigger loan, then you need to pay it back faster, 17% of your daily sales. Now, this is from several months ago. Here, that percentage was always 17%. So I guess they changed something in terms of their pricing. Obviously, I'm sure their strategy also adapts all the time. But they gave me a range of 51K to 81K. This is an example on the 24th of August. I actually took the screenshot. What's interesting is that a week later, this is on mobile phone, I took the screenshot. This got increased to, let's just take the highest figure. So first we were at 81K. Then a week later, they offered me 86K. Then another 10 days later, they offered me 115K. Then another 10 days later, 115K. Another week later, 135K. And then finally, another week after that, it was 145K. So what I also just wanted to show you guys is I remember I pulled up an email where the biggest I got for this store was 200K in funding that was offered to me by Shopify Capital. And again, they literally send you emails being like, view your offer, get, and this was for Black Friday, so this made sense, right? So it's like get 200K in funding for your Shopify store. Now, I'll compare the pros and cons in a second, right? To kind of give you, again, the broader overview, right? I think if you're growing with Shopify, right, and you want some short-term financing, generally for e-commerce, for your e-commerce store, and you're a relatively small store starting off, or already have some sort of scale, like some of the stores I showed you making 200-300K a month, or maybe even a bit bigger, I think you generally have 3 different options how to finance that growth, right, and to finance that working capital. So obviously you can take funding from your past profits, which, let's be honest, is very tough, right? And I don't think you'll be watching this video if you had such massive profits that you could just use that to finance whatever you wanted to in terms of future growth. But obviously, if you can, that's very impressive, first of all. So congratulations. Second of all, the question is, do you want to finance do you want to reinvest all of your profits? Do you want to maybe take some of those profits and maybe, not necessarily pay yourself out, but keep some sort of reserve, build some sort of buffer in terms of safety, maybe launch a new store, right? So there's many other considerations in terms of how you can utilize your profits from your personal savings. So let's be honest, again, I think no one wants to finance, 2 months worth of inventory with your personal savings. And just, probably you don't have 200K sitting around just like that for you to be buying inventory or to, going super aggressive in like 3 or 4 different marketing channels. And then the third option is some sort of debt or loan backed by your store performance. Why is this video about revenue-based financing? We looked at other options, right? You can obviously have, we can even talk about some classic examples like getting a bank loan or, getting some longer-term loan. But in practice, right, is that this will be much, much harder, way more tedious, and to be honest, also the terms will be much worse if you go the traditional route to get a bank loan on a Shopify store, D2C e-commerce store, that a traditional bank still doesn't want to underwrite, doesn't really want to understand in terms of risk profile, in terms of just that whole underwriting process will be, if you reach a certain scale, possible, but you're definitely going to have, terms that are going to, definitely be much more restrictive at the very least in terms of liability, right? Again, revenue-based financing is completely unsecured debt. And the beauty is that because those providers integrate with your Shopify store and they specialize in essentially analyzing your performance, they're actually able to offer you loans based on specifically your revenue. Obviously, that's what's called revenue-based financing, that you're able to pay off also very quickly, which comes with its own kind of issues. We'll touch on that. But at least it's reasonable and something you can actually get started off very quickly. Like it literally might take you just a couple of days from Shopify Capital to maybe a couple of weeks with some of the other providers. So I think those are the three different options that are actually realistic. All other options, and I'm not talking about like equity investments or something like that, because that's also, I think, very different. You're not going to use that to, finance your inventory, something like that. There are some other providers that specifically also focus on inventory or marketing only. But again, I think you want to give yourself a bit of a broader space in terms of financing your store for all kinds of expansion strategies you might have or ideas, right? And you don't want to kind of limit yourself in terms of one bucket of how you want to grow. And I think for that, revenue-based financing is still the best option out there. So as mentioned, I essentially discussed Shopify Capital. There's two other examples I want to talk about because we have experience with getting out loans with both of them. One is called Wayflyer, the other one's Uncapped. I would also mention Clearco, or Clearbank as it was previously called in the US, is also a massive one. There's like dozens of different providers. I think those three are definitely the top three. They're definitely in the top 5 or in the top 10. I think with Clearco, they're very, very popular. So let me touch on Wayflyer and Uncapped, the way they work and the way they're different with Shopify Capital. So let me actually pull up Wayflyer. Wayflyer, we had 3 loans with them. This is just showing one of them, and we have anyway. But I think this is more than enough to get the point across, and hopefully this isn't like information I can't share. But we got a loan of $60K with them, and the way it works is we had to pay back 61.5K, right? So you can see that's actually 3% fixed fee. With Wayflyer, it's usually 6%, but because this was a bigger loan, this was already our 3rd loan, we managed to negotiate a better deal, and they offered us 3%. And we actually paid back the loan in, so from December 28th, where we started making our first payments, we paid it back by March 21st, right? So you can see it took about like 3 months to pay back that loan. And yeah, so that's how Wayflyer works, actually, to be honest. You integrate with all kinds of, they also want to integrate with your Google ads, your Facebook ads, any sort of integration that you have in terms of marketing. You need to integrate manually when you set up the account with them. And then in terms of price, you can see they're much cheaper than Shopify Capital. But generally the model is that they charge you a fixed fee that you pay back based on your revenue, which in this case wasn't quite what happened because they weren't able to track our revenue accurately. We just had fixed payments every week or every second week. So that's the way it happened here. But generally the idea is that you would still pay back proportional to the revenue you're making, right? Now, this is actually an important point that I want to touch on, which I will once we discuss Uncapped. Now, Uncapped also gave us an offer for 20K. Again, this was a smaller loan for a different store. And the way they do it is they actually give you a whole range of different revenue shares for different advance amounts, right? So again, if you want, in this case, if we would have wanted 20K for that store, and we were just playing around here with different offers, right? We would have had to have a revenue share of 25%. Here, the fixed fee is 6%, right? So again, we will have to pay 6%. That's really the interest rate on this loan. And again, paid back by paying 25% of our revenue back until we finish paying the 6%. Now, again, this is variable. So if we only wanted 4K, whatever, get a really small loan, then we would have only had to pay back 5% of that revenue share. And you can see here, we will be able able to offer new funding as soon as you repay 50% in advance. So they also have this thing, and to be honest, the other providers also have that you can kind of top up as you go. And once you see that you are paying it in time and there's no issues with you as a customer, then they essentially pay you, you can start the conversation in terms of topping up. Now, this is from a long time ago. This is actually, I just quickly went through my emails. This is the first offer I could find. I think we had a couple from them, but what's kind of a bit of definitely a negative with Uncapped is that you can only use those funds for approved marketing vendors, Facebook, Google, Twitter, LinkedIn. If you want to actually use that funding for other things, like, for example, inventory or general expense invoices, they actually charge you extra, right? So for inventory, they charge you an extra 3.5%. And for other expenses, they charge you an extra 5%, right? And how this works is essentially they actually give you a card. They actually give you a card, like a virtual debit card or credit card or whatever, that you can only use then to actually pay for your Facebook and Google marketing campaigns. And anything above that, you actually need special permissions. So they actually restrict you in terms of where you use the financing, which is not the case with Wayflyer or Shopify Capital. Okay, before I go into all the pros and cons, which you can anyway see here, and I talked mostly about cost, integration, application process, and then also restrictions in terms of use of funds. I think those are the three most important factors that you would consider when choosing a revenue-based financing provider for your Shopify store. I want to talk in a way actually about the first point, which is cost. So clearly, Shopify Capital is the most expensive and Wayflyer is the cheapest, at least in our experience. I guess it also depends. If you're a much bigger store, the rates, obviously, they give you all kinds of discounts. But again, I'm also showing you only some of the offers we got. There's all the other offers that we got. And generally, this is what I see, that Wayflyer is the cheapest one with higher loans. We could get something like a 3% fixed rate. With Uncapped, it was 6%. And to be honest, I think 6%, also looking at all the other providers like Clearbank and a bunch of other ones, 6%, at least something like a few months ago, seemed to be like this market rate. Now, in 2023, with rates rising, I'm sure this is going to change. But anyway, to give you an idea, that was kind of the benchmark, at least around 2022. And the way the business model works, right, and I should have explained this in the beginning a bit more clear in case you're new to this, right, is that you pay the loan they give you, right, is that you pay a fixed fee, right? So let's just say you pay a 6% fixed fee. Now, so let's just keep this extremely simple, right? And let's say you get a loan of 1,000, right? That means that you need to pay back 60 in interest rate, right, which is the 6% fixed fee. Now, because you're paying back from your revenue, right, how usually they time it with the revenue-based financing is that you actually pay back the loan in something like 2 or 3 months, right? So like the loan maturity, the loan length, right, essentially, that they provide and they give you is very short term. It's essentially you're taking out a loan for 2 to 3 months and you're paying a 6% fee on that. And what I obviously want you to understand, if that's already not clear, is that the APR, right, so the annual kind of interest rate that you're paying on those loans is actually very high, right, because you need to adjust it for the maturity, the loan maturity. So if you're paying a 6% fixed fee on a 3-month loan, right, then if you obviously take it out on an annual basis, right, you would take the 6 and multiply it by 4, because there's obviously 4 quarters in a year. And you already see that the APR is actually something like 24%. In fact, it's even higher because, again, you start repaying your loan the day after you get it, right? So you get let's say you get 1,000 in revenue-based financing today. Tomorrow, you already start paying back. Not all of them do like a daily thing, but it might be weekly. But the point is, tomorrow already, based on the revenue your store is making, you start paying back off that loan, right? So by halfway through that 3-month period, let's just assume you're taking out a loan for 3 months, you've already paid back half of your loan. So in practice, if you kind of take out that average, you're actually only taking out half of that loan for the 3 months because you've already paid. You're paying it off throughout, right? Long story short, hopefully that made sense. Is your actual APR is another double because you're paying off that loan throughout. It's not a bullet payment, right? You're paying it off throughout the length of the loan, meaning that the APR is actually more than 50% for most of those loans. And that is obviously, if you're constantly topping up with revenue-based financing loans, let's assume you're just constantly using them over and over and over again throughout the year, right? If you actually do the math, right, the APRs, annual percentages, the annual interest rates that you're paying to get this type of financing is very expensive, right? It's north of 50%. And that's why I think, and again, for Shopify Capital, again, if the fixed fee is 13%, then you can just imagine what the APR there is probably, even much, much higher. So with so like my example was with a 6% fixed fee. Anyway, keep that in mind, because obviously you need to be pretty profitable to be paying such annual, fees in terms of interest rates. And again, this ties in also with our profitability presentation that I have talked about in the previous video, where I think you need a certain amount of net profit margin, contribution margin, to be able to actually pay back this this interest fee in a way that doesn't actually put too much pressure on your store. And that's definitely why we actually tried not to use revenue-based financing where possible, and only use it if it was completely essential. And also, of course, we wanted to understand the space, but that is kind of my word of caution, actually. But anyway, it obviously has its use cases. So when you're growing fast and you want to expand aggressively, it definitely has its use cases. So let's summarize my kind of takeaways in terms of the pros and cons. Shopify Capital is the most expensive, but it has the smoothest integration, obviously, because they already have everything that they need to know about your Shopify store, right? They see all your KPIs. It's literally in your settings page that you can get the offer. And there's also no restriction in terms of the funds, right? What I actually thought is that Shopify would somehow give you funding and deduct it from your Shopify payments if you use, Shopify payments as your payment processor. That literally, the revenue you make on a given day, they would deduct the amount that you need to pay back. But they don't actually do that quite. They actually do send you the money to your bank account, and from your bank account, there's a direct debit. That's how most of them work. That actually deducts those payments daily. So keep that in mind. So Shopify payments does work pretty fast. You can actually get the loan in a matter of days. They're by far the fastest because the integration is the smoothest. But also that comes with obviously the trade-off of them being the most expensive, at least for now. Wayflyer is the cheapest from what we've tested. However, to be honest, the integration was very tedious. The application was very long and repetitive and actually quite annoying at times. You do get through it, and I think maybe we were just unlucky. For example, there were certain issues where they couldn't match our currency. Integrations with our bank were not smooth at all. They had issues just integrating with our bank account. Setting up the direct debit, then we had to manually transfer money on a weekly basis. Like I said, it wasn't really revenue based. It was just a weekly calculation that was done manually. That means I had to manually transfer the money every week, which was quite annoying. It was not automated, although I think generally we were an outlier in this case, right? Generally, it would also be automated like with Shopify Capital. And that means, at least on that stage, if you're a classic Shopify store where you don't have any like weird currency considerations, then that should be fine. Still, it took much longer to actually get the approval process going. It takes something like, I would say, like for us, 2 to 3 weeks. So factor that in. For Shopify Capital, it's something like 2 to 3 days. So it does make a difference. And there's definitely a much longer process of you actually having to talk to people and go and actually explain your business and then doing somewhat of a due diligence. I do think it is something that obviously improves over time. So once you do it once, getting additional loans on your store obviously becomes easier and easier. That's the case anywhere. And also they do not have any restrictions in terms of the funds that where you can use those funds. Finally, Uncapped, they're somewhere on average 6% interest rate. That's pretty average from the revenue-based financing providers that we have dealt with. Also some of the other ones where we just like looked online of their costs. However, they also have a relatively tedious application process, issues with integrations, at least with us. I would say about similar to Wayflyer. And they also have those restrictions, right, in terms of where you can use that money. I think that's a big negative. I would really watch out for that, unless you're 100% confident that you only want to use this money for Facebook and Google and a few of the other big platforms that are approved by them. I actually think that it doesn't make sense to have this restriction. If again you can have another provider that does not restrict you in terms of where you spend this money, I think it always makes sense to to give yourself that flexibility, because again, growth might come from another channel, it might come from another angle, so you want to keep yourself open to those opportunities. Anyway, this was my experience with revenue-based financing. Hopefully you found that helpful. We keep exploring that space, and maybe we'll do more videos on that. So let me know your thoughts, and see you in the next video. Hey, before you bounce, consider subscribing to our channel, but only if you've actually enjoyed the video and found at least a few valuable things for your Shopify store. Also, check out our free Shopify app, Trackidex. We have a link in the description below. We're developing new features literally every day, and we're also excited to actually hear your feedback on some of the next features we should develop. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.